Hello everyone, this is D. Mary Suguna, lecturer in English at Satsyareddy College for Women, Eluru. Let me draw your attention towards your perseverance and enrich your thoughts by studying and understanding the title, themes, and content of the poem Digging. Digging is a poem by Seamus Heaney. You can see the picture of the poet Seamus Heaney. Before we go into the detailed study of the poem Digging, let us first study about the poet. Introduction to the poet. Seamus Justin Heaney, born on 13th April 1939 and died on 30th August in the year 2013. He was an Irish poet, playwright, and translator. He completed his primary education in Derry, later travelled to Belfast to study English language and literature at Queen's University, Belfast. He published Death of a Naturalist in the year 1966, which received critical acclaim and won several awards. In the year 1989, Heaney was elected Professor of Poetry at the University of Oxford. Yes, Seamus Justin Heaney was an Irish poet, belongs to Ireland. He completed his education in Derry, later shifted to Belfast to study English language and literature. Death of a Naturalist was a collection of poems by Seamus Heaney. It is Heaney's first book of poetry. The book and the poem Digging did much to establish Heaney's reputation as the leading Irish poet of his generation. Heaney taught at Harvard University and served as the Oxford Professor of Poetry. He was the author of over 20 volumes of poetry and criticism and edited several widely used anthologies. He received several prizes, including the 1995 Nobel Prize in Literature. Yes, he was the author of over 20 volumes of poetry and criticism books. Heaney has attracted a readership on several continents and has won prestigious awards and honors, including Nobel Prize in the year 1995. Seamus Heaney published 20 volumes of books, and some of his works were Door into the Dark, published in the year 1969, Wintering Out, published in the year 1973, North, published in the year 1975, Electric Light, published in the year 2001, and finally District and Circle, published in the year 2006. Heaney was an Irish poet, so his works, notable for its evocation of Irish rural life and events in Irish history, as well as its allusions to Irish myth. You can clearly see how Heaney used Irish history and tradition in this poem called Digging. Digging is a narrative poem and autobiographical in nature and was first published in 1966 in his poetry collection Death of a Naturalist. The poem reflects the strong feelings Heaney has for the land. He grew up on a farm, Mossbourne, in County Derry, where his father worked the soil and sold cattle for a living. Digging. Digging means to move earth and make a hole in the ground. The work dig becomes a link between past and present of the poet. Here, autobiographical in nature. That means we can also see some of the poet's nostalgic elements were included in this poem. And this poem is taken from the collection of A Death of a Naturalist, which was published in the year 1966. Yes, of course, the poem reflects the strong feelings Heaney has for the land that where he lived. He grew up on a farm and he experienced the struggle of his parents and his grandfather that was clearly depicted through his words in this poem. Digging. The poem goes like this. Between my finger and my thumb, the sweat pen rests snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging. I look down till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato grills where he was digging. The coyote's boot nestled on the lug. The shaft, against the inside knee, was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep, to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Tonnersburg. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, having swords over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf digging. The cold smell of potato mould, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I have no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the fat pen reads, I will dig with it. The poem begins with the speaker who looks upon himself, his pen poised upon his paper, as he listens to the noise of his father digging outside the window. The speaker looks down, both away from and at his father, and describes a slip in time. Here, the poet describes himself and also describes a landscape where his father and grandfather both work, linking landscapes in the present 20 years before, and even before that, that means when his grandfather worked. And the tone of the poem is wistful and serious, yet firmly rooted in the present as well as past. The major conflict in digging seems to arise from the contrast between the poet's work in the present and his ancestors' work in the past. In this poem, we can see three characters. They were the speaker, his father, and his grandfather. They were all central to the poem. The poem opens with an image of the speaker poised over a page, about to start writing something. His pen reads, snug as a gun. He used snug as a gun. Both are the powerful tools for social changes, and it has serious consequences. The speaker looks down from his window. When he looked down at his father and he slipped in time, his father remains where he is, but the poem slips 20 years into the past, indicating the length of his father's career as a farmer. The speaker or the poet emphasizes the continuity of his father's profession as a farmer, and the moment shifts out of the present tense and into the past. When he heard the sound from the ground, suddenly he slipped from the present into the past. He remembered all his work, especially his father's hard work, how he used to continue his job as a farmer, how he used to continue his struggles as a farmer. So he clearly, especially the poet, he mentions that my father digging, I look down. And in the next stanza, till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, and it is an indication that the poet's father or the speaker's father was working hard for 20 years, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. And here, the poet's father or the speaker's father he was working in potato field, because we already know that Seamus Heaney, he belongs to Ireland, where potato was the staple food for the Irish people. So the poet's father was a potato digger. And in the next stanza, the speaker then changes his focus to his father's tools, saying, "The courier's boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly." And he described how his father's shovel fits against his boot and leg. And he also indicates the work that he also done in his in the sense he also worked in the field. He means the speaker, and he clearly used the word to scatter new potatoes that we picked. That means the potatoes were collected, maybe his family members. Shima's Hini was also included to do his work or to support his family. And in the next stanza, we can see the clear difference or the variation between the father and his grandfather. By God, the old man could handle a spade just like his old man, because the speaker's father was an expert, because he learned or maybe he practiced to handle a spade just like his father. That means speaker's old man. And he, that means the speaker, he has depicted clearly his grandfather was also a digger. And the next stanza shows, my grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Turner's work. It indicates the speaker's grandfather was a very good digger. He cut more turf for fuel in a day than any other man on Turner's Bog place. Turner's Bog is a place. As a child, the speaker carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. It is an indication that the milk which is supplied to his grandfather is also from his farm. His grandfather straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away. And the hard work, the dedication or the determination shown by the speaker's grandfather towards his work. And it is an indication that the poet's or the speaker's grandfather, he was completely involved in his work. He just straightened to drink his milk, then fell to right away. And in the next stanza, nicking and slicing neatly, having swords over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf digging. And the poets or the speakers family, they were completely dedicated towards their work. And here Shimasini, he explained the skill, the dedication of his grandfather towards his work, going down and down for the good turf, for the fuel he was digging. Next, the cold smell of potato mould, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the cuts of an edge, through living roots awaken in my head. but I have no spade to follow men like them. Here, the poet explained, or the speaker explained, the impact of his rural upbringing had on him. He ends the stanza by saying, of course, he has no spade to follow men like his father and grandfather. But I have one weapon, that is a pen. I'll dig with it. The poet takes his pen to be his weapon. He probably thinks that he can bring some social change through his pen. Of course, I may not follow the men like them. That means he clearly projected or portrayed that he may not follow his father, he may not follow his grandfather, but I can dig with my pen. Of course, I don't know how to use a spade just like my father and grandfather, but I know how to use the pen to dig. I'll dig with my pen to bring some change in my country. Summary of the poem. Digging says Heaney reflecting on his father, who used to dig potato drills, but now struggles to dig flower beds in his garden. The poet's grandfather, he recollects, used to dig peat, and now he, the son and grandson, does not dig the earth at all. Instead, he writes with his fat pen in his hand rather than a spade. And yet, he concludes he can use the pen to perform a different sort of digging from that practiced by his father and grandfather. He can use his pen to dig into his past, the lives of his father and grandfather, and of Ireland more widely. Yes, digging. And here, he had shown the differences between his father and his grandfather and him. He recollected all of his experiences, how his father was worked hard and how his grandfather worked hard to dig the turf. But now Heaney has no other option to continue his family's tradition of digging. But he has the optimism, the optimistic feelings towards, of course, I may not practice like my father or grandfather, but I can continue one thing, that is to dig into his past, the lives of his father and grandfather, and of Ireland more widely, so that people they may understand how his family tried to bring forth or tried to give food to the society, how they worked hard to give food or to feed the family. He had shown his tradition, his family's tradition of digging. At the same time, he also projecting the family's tradition of digging to the society by writing poem called Digging. The major themes of this poem are inheritance, identity, family, man and the natural world, admiration, hard work, sustenance, and manual labor. And here, inheritance, of course, he is the poet's father or the speaker's father and grandfather. They were diggers. Now, he also got the same job of digging, but they dig into the earth, but the speaker digs into his past, family's past. Identity, and we can see the theme of identity in this poem, family, and we can see the family, the bond between his father and his grandfather and the speaker, man and the natural world. And here he portrayed the real situations at farming, hard work, how the hard work was the major reason for him, how his father worked hard and how his grandfather worked hard, sustenance and manual labor. All these were the major themes that recollected in the poem called Digging. Another important aspect in this poem is the poetic devices used by the poet Seamus Heaney. Literary devices are tools used by writers to convey their emotions, ideas, and themes to make texts more appealing to the reader. Seamus Heaney has also used literary devices in this poem to express his ideas. The first device is enjambment. It is defined as a thought or clause that does not come to an end at a line break. Instead, it moves over the next line. For example, the cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy wheat, the curds of an edge, through living roots awaken in my mind. And this is the apt example to this device. Next, imagery. Basically, imagery is used to make readers perceive things involving their five senses. The best example is between my finger and my thumb. Next, assonance. Assonance, it is the repetition of vowel sounds in the same line. The next poetic device is consonance. It is the repetition of consonant sounds in the same line. Fifth poetic device is alliteration. It is the repetition of consonants in the same line with quick successions. Symbolism. It means to use symbols to signify ideas and qualities, giving them symbolic meanings that are different from the literal meanings. For example, the pen is a symbol. Here, the poet or the speaker used pen is the subject of an interesting transition in the poem. The first lines of the poem describe it and compare how it fits in the speaker's hand to how a gun would. The way fits strikes a parallel, however, with the description of the shovel fitted with his father's leg and boots. These are the images that were used. And here another important symbol is potatoes. Of course, potatoes were the staple food of the Ireland, and in the most of the Irish people used to eat potatoes. And he also describes the potatoes that makes them very tangible. They wrote the speaker in his past. And he also tells that the memories of the great potato famine that the poet does not mention, but that nevertheless serves as the implied background or backdrop to this poem. Another important symbol is milk. The speaker remembered bringing to his grandfather, symbolizes sustenance and reflects the rural way the speaker grew up. By having the bottle corked sloppily with paper, the speaker told or tells the reader that this milk likely came from their farm, not from shop. Another important device is simile. It is a figure of speech in which implied comparison is made between the objects that are different in nature using as or like. The example is the swat pen reads snug as a gun. Here the pen reads snug as gun. So this is the best example to describe simile in this poem called Digging. And coming to the structure, when you look at the poem, you may find 8 stanzas in this poem, and each stanza varies in length, and totally we have 31 lines. And the poem was written in free verse. Free verse means it is a type of poetry that does not contain patterns of rhyme or meter. This is a free verse poem with no strict rhyme or meter. And the final part is conclusion. Digging is one of Shima Sene's best known poem. Yes, of course, the title is apt, which shows work, ritual, and the need to craft are 3 of the themes that run throughout the story. The tone is serious and full of reflection. The speaker is looking back through the family history, noting how hard his father and his grandfather have worked the land. The speaker's approach is serious and studied and quietly assured, which creates a tone of thoughtful admiration and pride. He has respect for those who were expert diggers. And coming to the frequently asked questions from the poem called Digging. The first question is, describe the tone of the poem Digging. Second question is, what are the 2 meanings of the title of Shima Sene's poem Digging? Third question, what is the main theme of the poem? Fourth question, in the Shima Sene poem Digging, how does the poet feel about his father's work? Fifth question, how does Shima Sene shows his family tradition in his poem Digging. References. These are all the references or the sources that I used to make this presentation. Thank you.